Interesting. Yeah, we're certainly seeing that on our end as well. Vertical integration, people are trying to go down, they're trying to, mitigate all the risks. I think it took, a TP shortage during COVID for people to really start caring about supply chains. So, interesting. Moving to the next topic, question number two, current events and risks. So, what's the latest right now? We had COVID-19, we had Ukraine, we had inflation. What are you guys seeing right now? For this one, why don't we go ahead and start with you, Cal?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because on the brand side, unless you have like a large vertical supply chain integration, you don't necessarily feel the like Ukraine scenario as quickly as you might have like COVID, right? But you feel it in the long run as maybe you get tighter on a price quote back on a product, or you're going through prod dev and the access to an ingredient has changed or different. But I think from a brand perspective, some of the things that we're seeing right now, like current events and risk is, Amazon, they launched kind of a whole new change on the way that supplements have to be tested to be sold on Amazon. You've got that across like men's like sex health and weight loss and the muscle and kind of strength category, which is honestly very gray as to what falls into that category in general. And like those three categories are like some of the best profit margin products that are in the industry, especially on the sports nutrition side. And so Amazon's, move to almost self-regulate before the government comes in to regulate, I think is like pretty interesting trend. Brands that are quick to pivot and find solutions are going to kind of maintain some of that. And then brands that aren't, I mean, they're going to have invested years of dollars in advertising to secure, reviews and ranking and all that kind of stuff that's going to like change because they can't get their products to pass in an SF oriented test. I continue to see more kind of increased government. I don't know if regulation is the right word, but I think it's definitely increased awareness. I mean, we had the whole situation with the NMN last year, kind of shows the government's looking at some of these things in more detail. And then like right now, which I think we're going to dive into product trends anyways, but like we start having products like the Ozempics and the category as a whole is going to go try to figure out how do we do a non-pharmaceutical grade version of that we can then go market. Well, because of like the increased nature of the awareness of Ozempic, then so is the increased nature of the awareness of marketing advertising of like Ozempic, but not pharmaceutical grade products that are getting marketed. And in addition, it's like we have so many platforms and avenues that we're marketing in that we weren't before. And then, I mean, I think in general, we're going into an election season. Anyone who's doing D2C, who's buying ads and is fighting for advertisement space is just going to see like a higher cost of ads in general because the traffic and the competition for that traffic is now kind of being shared with political parties, PACs, all that kind of stuff. And so we're going to probably see some brands that choose to like delay a product launch or delay an expansion on a flavor or something of that nature because the assets that we're going to put behind that maybe don't have as big of a bang for what the expectation of it. I don't know. We also could see other brands who try to use this and maybe are trying to align or trying to do something along the lines of political perspective or thought in regards to one party versus another, who may see this as like an avenue to launch products. But in general, the cost is going to be higher, especially in the D2C market, from an advertising perspective. That's a couple of things on my end that I'm seeing.
No, interesting. I think naturally, Jacob, you find yourself in the middle of this one, both in the question here and in your position. You have brands that, prior to COVID, they wanted just-in-time shipping. They wanted to do every little tweak they could do to maximize their margins. And then all of a sudden you had COVID and it was about capacity. Can you produce my product? Because I don't care because there's demand for it. And now you have people saying, okay, I'm worried about my risk because I couldn't get my product during COVID. How are you managing all this, and how are you continuing to remain profitable during these challenges? And what risks are you seeing today? What do people care about now?
So we'll dive into that in a second, but to kind of like piggyback, off of Cale, right? Like John, you and I had to talk about this. The majority of my time right now is kind of spent on a lot of Ozempic-esque formulations, product development, brand strategy, because we did see, a dip when it came to like Walmart analytics, right? I think Walmart was the first one to kind of come out and say, hey, our shopping carts are actually decreasing because of Ozempic. And then now you see some of the current events like Vitamin Shop or GNC who open up GLP-1 sections throughout their stores nationwide.
Yeah.
And then you have Vitamin Shop take that a step further, dipping their toes kind of into like telehealth, and they can now prescribe, Ozempic or Wegovy. And I think it was a very, very smart play because foot traffic was down. But now you have a place that you can go into and talk to, experts based around this specific trend. But brands have an opportunity in that by paying attention to the risks that come with something like an Ozempic, an injectable, a prescription, and things like that. Gut health right now is absolutely crushing it. So maybe you saw a dip in your sales on your fat burner, your nighttime fat burner, things like that, because now somebody is on Ozempic or Wegovy or a drug just like that. And now there really isn't a need for that specific product, that specific category, because they have something else taking that place that is going to be far more effective. So, to put a fat burner up against a drug, it's a very, very tough thing to compete against. But how do you pivot from that is like, okay, well, what other issues are going to pop up with something like an Ozempic? You're going to have mineral vitamin depletion. So did you come out with something that is actually going to be synergistic to that trend, to that risk? Greens products become much more vital as well because your nutrient deficiency, you're not getting short chain fatty acids, you're not getting resistant starches. How that affects your consumer as a brand, you need to take all of that into consideration to be able to pivot, act fast, and make sure that you have that close relationship with your contract manufacturer that is in tune with those trends, that wants to help from a product development standpoint, that's going to put you in the strongest position to be able to ride that wave. And it's also one that's not going away. Nestle just announced that they're actually going to launch their first line of frozen foods specifically for GLP-1. So it's not really going anywhere because it is an actual lifestyle shift. And it's, people talk about the risk of drugs. Well, is it more risky to hop on that drug, or is it more risky to be 50, 60, 70 pounds overweight? The health risks that come with, obesity are very severe and maybe outweigh taking that drug. But you're also going to see consumer awareness that maybe also don't want to take that risk of injecting something into their body. So that's when we started to see trends with products that could not necessarily replicate Ozempic, but kind of mirror Ozempic in regards to, blood glucose management, being able to shuttle carbohydrates and fats, as nutrients for energy. So we did see a spike in like those type of berberine type products that contain sinulin, chromium, those kinds of ingredients. And that's why it's so important to stay in close contact with your raw material suppliers. What new studies are they going to come out with to support a trend like that? So our request and demand for Ozempic like products around fibers and greens, berberines are at an all-time high. And then you maybe have some brands like Cale said, well, my cost of acquisition now to go capture a customer during an election year used to be $50 or $100, and now it's $250. But if your lifetime value analytics outweigh that, at $500 to $750, because from a subscription-based model, you're able to capture a customer for 6 months to 9 months, brands are going to be willing to take more of a risk because they also know that their competitors aren't. So if you aren't paying attention to your cost of acquisition from a consumer standpoint, as well as your lifetime value, if your lifetime value is going to be able to outweigh your cost of acquisition during any season, holidays, supply chain shortages in an election year, you hedge your bet, and you kind of double down from that standpoint, you might be able to outride that wave in your competition. Same with TikTok, right? TikTok is going to influence a lot of trends, but I want to make sure that we save some time for Ryan here because I know I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
No doubt. I know you could talk to it all day. Ryan, so what does this mean for you? You're trying to keep the cost low enough for, Jacob and the teams can still make it affordable for the consumer. Everybody's pushing back on you for price. You're kind of like the buck stops with you. How are you managing all the changes here? Staying with, constant communication with your customers to ensure they're getting competitive pricing and mitigating all these risks, because current risks and events for you means a whole different thing.
Absolutely. Geopolitical risks are always a number one thing that we're always looking at. Of course, the tensions between China and the US are, coming to an all-time high. There's talks about additional tariffs on products, as Jacob mentioned about the pea protein having over 200% tariff added onto that ingredient. If there's another 10%, 20% added on to every single ingredient, what are we there to do for our clients? And, what we've been doing at least is diversifying our supply chain outside of China. We actually changed our name from Shanghai Freeman to Freeman Nutra, mainly because we're becoming more of a global footprint. We've opened up facilities all throughout the world. In doing so, what our biggest value to our clients was, hey, we have boots on the ground in China. We can talk to the manufacturers, get the market information that you need, and stay ahead of these trends. Now, while diversifying outside of China, we need to put boots on the ground in all of those countries as well, so we can continue to provide that value to all of our clients. So opening up facilities everywhere to find which ingredients can we source outside of those countries. Now, many of the manufacturers in China are starting to open up facilities in other countries. So at the end of the day, it's still a lot of the manufacturers that we've worked with in the past, but they're moving to Thailand, Indonesia, all throughout the Indo-Pacific area. We have seen, glycine is a good example that even in Indonesia area, it was already tariffed again. And they're going to move their facility once again to avoid that tariff. So manufacturers are opening up all over the place, and working with those to understand how to diversify everybody's supply chain as much as possible is the best solution that we can give to our customers here. We have an initiative to do at least 25% of our ingredients outside of China. So that's going to increase everybody's risk management in the long run. Additionally, other suppliers, including ourselves, we're putting inventory all throughout the world. So to avoid future tariffs, because if it's already in our warehouse and we have ownership of it, we avoid that additional tariff in the future. And it does spare us some time to figure out the next solution. It is a proactive move that a lot of people are doing just to make sure, hey, what happens if, and we can, of course, rub our little crystal ball and figure out what's going to happen next, but trying to be ahead of the game and being proactive for everybody and sourcing different materials, putting them in different warehouses, having ownership, locking in contracts, as Jacob said, to ensure that the client doesn't have these risks impact them immediately. And that gives us all time to find a solution by working with everybody to figure out, all right, what's the next step? Where do we need to go for the future? How can we help, the contract manufacturer? How can we help the brand continue to keep their costs as low as possible? Sourcing ingredients outside of China are typically more expensive, but what's the risk reward there for the brand to have, ultimate supply chain? Because if your product is off the shelf, that costs a lot more than adding another $1 or $2 on a raw ingredient for the future.
Absolutely. No, that's interesting. So yeah, geopolitical, decoupling from China is certainly a hot topic right now across both parties for sure, and consumers. So that's very interesting. If you're changing your name, it's making a very large impact. So